Dr. Andrea Vitz,
Hello.
and you're
Oh,
listening.
there we go. Let's go again.
This is Dr. Andrea Vitz, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
Yes, indeed. Now, I'm going to give you a little intro, but I just want to explain my surroundings because I am in the future Diablo Barbell Media Room that is not yet done, but it is framed and insulated and ready for sheetrock. And I really wanted to do the episode from up here. So here I am. That means we're in the same building, but in different rooms.
Yes.
And now I'm going to tell our audience that Andrea Vitz has been on the show before. You may know who she is. A lot of people in our community know who she is. She's written a book called The You You've Never Met. The book is this. And
That
it
is
is
the
thick, and it is dense, and there is heavy, heavy work to be done in this book. It's The You You've Never Met, How to Stop Experiencing Pain and Chaos in All of Your Relationships by Sobering Up, Emotionally Speaking.
That's right.
That title is a bit of a handful. It's heady stuff.
The book is a bit of a handful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about this book is going to reach everybody, or I should say is reaching everybody, because the book's been out for 2 weeks, maybe?
I think 3.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I know that within the community of folks that tie us together, the book has affected everybody.
Yeah, it's I've done maybe 4 workshops now that have been packed pretty full, and they're 3-week long courses. And everybody has had just massive epiphany, and it has translated to every corner of their life so far. And that has been such positive feedback for so early in the game, so to speak, even though I've been working on this concept and doing this work for so many years. Having it be available to groups of community as opposed to one-on-one people has made a huge difference in terms of how people are in training to the concepts and seeking to do that gritty work and finding the courage to do it together. And one person being very vulnerable about maybe finding their motive behind something, it really brings them to want to do the same thing. And it's such a powerful entrainment process overall, how we can not only heal in community, but evolve at a greater rate together.
Yeah, that's a very heavy concept because of its effectiveness. I mean, I've seen such, well, full disclaimer for our crowd, I haven't done this work. And I think people are going to be confused for a minute because we're talking about a book. And you should go to Amazon and buy the book, and we'll provide an Amazon link on the show notes. But with the book, or the book is really the text of a curriculum, and the curriculum is really what's heavy, and everybody who goes through it, and you've had several people go through it in so far 2 groups, is that correct? Or
4.
4 groups. 4 groups of people have gone through this. Now, one of those groups of people included my wife. And so while I haven't done the work, I have sat back and watched the effect of the work and seen it up close and personal. And boy, is it personal.
Yeah, everything's personal.
Yeah. And the amount of willingness, the amount of candor that exists, and everybody's exposing of their discovery process, and what I've seen of the willingness of everyone to jump in and not only make themselves vulnerable, but support everybody else's vulnerability has been just remarkable.
It's extraordinary. I really haven't seen anything quite like it because I've been in healing circles before, and yeah, sure, people get vulnerable, but there's so many different layers to this work that take you even deeper into your really who you've been being on the realist level. Things that we're not invited to look at so deeply. And when you see, if I explain to you how I do it, you could say, oh yeah, but sure, you're the teacher. But I wasn't always the teacher, right? I started as at a huge deficit in emotional sobriety. And that's what puts me in a position to be able to create this curriculum and give it humbly to everybody because it is for everybody. And most importantly, because I had to climb out of the hill, out of the hole and figure it out. And it worked so beautifully for me. And because of this, I had such incredible epiphany and so many wonderful messages that came through me that it just puts me in a position to be the teacher of this, but I'm no better than anyone else. I'm no better than any student that comes to me or any person who comes to me and says, I'm struggling with massive jealousy. I'm struggling with dishonesty. I'm struggling with I'm a victim in my life, even. And really reminding people to turn around and only focus on taking responsibility for themselves and making themselves at the highest vibration in terms of not having this disreality around them that they're a victim or that they're not whole or that things happen to them, and reminding them that they have all the power and that they're the common denominator in all their problems. So if that's true, then they're the solution.
I don't know that that's something that people are ready to hear just yet. I think that when people hear things like that, they go, it's easy to dismiss because you don't want to go near it.
Of course. That's why this work is for the brave and the gritty.
Okay, let's start there. This work is for the brave and the gritty. So let's face it, if you're not brave, if you're not gritty, if you're not ready.
So no one's ever really ready. I think that that's a misconception. I think that a lot of people say that when I'm ready, I'll go on a diet. When I'm ready, I'll start working out. When I'm ready, I'll do some personal growth. You're never ready. In fact, they often say that you need to hit a bottom to change, right? And even in that bottom, you're not ready. There's just no other option, right? So my philosophy is that you don't have to hit bottom to change, and you don't have to be massively suffering to change. You can just decide to change, and however that looks for you. And that's what I mean by brave. This isn't for people who are already doing courageous things. These are for people who are just ready to take a risk and look at themselves and just see how much more closely they can look and correct certain things that are defective in terms of causing problems in their life. And that's bravery. Bravery is when you don't want to do something, you're too scared and you do it anyways.
Yeah. I think another obstacle, though, is that people think I'm almost ready.
Yes.
When I say people, I mean me. Because we've been through now a couple of different kinds of journeys
Yes.
that I've been through with you. And one of them was a physical transformation that came from an attitude transformation that I was almost ready to make. And really that I don't want to say you peer pressured me, but I do want to say that.
I never peer pressured you.
Here's why I want to say that. I want to say that because I remember when you treated me for my aching, mostly back, but also hip and knee and whatever ailed me. And at one point in that treatment, you said, we wouldn't have to do this so often if you were stronger. And that is a true statement. And it was a gentle and at the time very concerned and loving statement. But it was peer pressure to me.
I think it was inspiration.
Okay. You can call it that. That's it. That's accurate. That's accurate.
Let me ask you something. Did I lead you down the wrong path for you?
No, absolutely not.
Were you ready? Were you ready? Probably not.
I was readier than I thought I was.
Right. And all of us are. We all have that little voice in our head that wants us to stay exactly as we are, because I think there's a part of us that thinks, if I attempt to change or if I start changing, one, I might fail, and two, maybe it means that I've been wrong this whole time and I'm not willing to look at that, or I'm not willing to go there. Yes. But the thing is if you look at growth as if you're just taking a new class, it doesn't mean you're unintelligent. It doesn't mean that your level of education so far has been deficient. It just means you want more. You're interested in advancing to in a different way, or learning a new skill. That's all. So for you, if we're looking at the physical body as a analogy, it's such a great analogy because it's a fractal of everything else. The
Hmm.
physical body being this beautiful whole thing and perfect in its own right, if it isn't maintained, if it isn't taken care of in the appropriate ways, it's going to, quote, fail us. But we never, ever are failed by our bodies. We fail our bodies. We're not failed by other people. We fail ourselves by not being the people who are self reliant and not being people who are impeccably honest and not being people who can trust themselves so completely that if anything happened in their lives that was a surprise or a sudden shift, we knew we'd be able to handle it, right? So for you, when you get your physical body so strong, nothing happens to that body anymore. You are in charge of that body, right? It is
Yeah.
so sturdy. Nothing get. And in fact, if you got in a car accident right now, hopefully that never happens, but if you did, you would be so much more likely to be less injured or not injured because of the maintenance you've taken on that body. So now what if we did the same thing for our emotional health? What if we did the same thing for every plane of our existence? It's the same. So all of the things that we think we suffer with in life are most unnecessary. And that is what I do is I just shift perspective. I give people invitations to just know that, to remember their power. And to me, that's what empowerment is, right? You're already powerful. I'm just going to remind you.
Yes.
That's it.
You're right. You're right.
And you've done an amazing job.
I
May
can
I
say
just,
that I was peer pressured. Well, thank you. I can say that I was peer pressured because I like to couch it that way. I find myself doing a lot of things differently now than just language wise. The way that I was raised, the way I was raised in a neighborhood full of boys, and we all loved each other, and many of us still continue to stay in touch and love each other and love each other's kids and things like that. But there's an amount of inculcated language that's probably, it's not that positive. It's a lot of it's just gentle ribbing, but with it comes this overtone of, it's not positivity. It is referring to things as peer pressure, stuff like that.
mm,
And even with the best of intentions, when I say that you peer pressured me into, straightening out something that I probably should have been attacking much longer than I have. I mean, think now the only thing I'm left with is what progress I would have made it. I started sooner.
oh yeah. And that's needless.
Yeah. But still, I find myself in the trap where, I say things to people or I point things out or I do things in such a way that it's funny and it's ribbing, but I come away from the experience thinking, I could have encouraged something instead.
Mm.
Is there a fine line there? Is there room for, because now I'm identifying these things that I say with myself, and like Pete and I, for instance, we always rib each other. That's just the way we communicate. That's how we love on each other.
That's
But
very normal
yeah, at
for,
what point
especially,
though is it not familiar enough with a person? Or because I recently ribbed somebody who I'm pretty good friends with, but we're not really close. So I left that experience wondering if they took the ribbing the right way.
so there's a couple things there. One is you can directly ask the person,
Okay.
right?
Didn't
And,
think of
and
that.
yeah, you can
Didn't dawn on
directly ask them. Secondly, I want people to understand that, in my opinion, humor is an advanced practice.
me. Hmm.
It is not to be taken lightly. And I think you can look at some of the best, even the best comedians, right? The best comedians are the ones who they're evenly ribbing everything and everyone, or they don't at all. They're very clean and objective and observant in their humor. And they use it in a very skillful manner. They don't do it in a lazy tone. in order to create a temporary friendship. So I think a lot of us use humor to kind of nudge ourselves into a familiar territory with somebody because we're not quite ready to be vulnerable with them, but we also want to show we have an interest in them as a friend or more. So humor, like you said, it can really cause some issues if we don't take it seriously and respect it, right? But it makes sense because that's the language that you grew up on. It's like, see, we're cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in your case, easy. You write them a note and say, you know what? I realized I felt so comfortable with you so fast that I said, a humorous thing in front of you. Maybe it was premature and I apologize, or, give me feedback here. Like what's appropriate for you? What makes you feel good and what
Wow.
makes you feel safe? Just
That's
very
so
direct.
simple.
Simple. That's the thing. So many things about our lives are so much more simple than we let them out to be. And I think that the more you do that with every aspect of your life, you recognize, oh my gosh, I had this power all along. I could have just asked, or I could have just said this, or I could have just done this.
Is
You
that how
know,
you encapsulate emotional sobriety?
emotional sobriety is no longer having things that we filter, no longer having something that I call trauma filters and emotionally triggered behaviors that are all in response to our trauma influenced self beliefs. So the things that we believe about ourselves due to early age trauma or that we observed or delivered ourselves that we carried into adulthood. And our trauma filters are the things that we place over every given situation in order to validate that belief. So, for example, I am inadequate or I am unworthy. These are my self beliefs that I've taken away from my early age trauma. My trauma filter would be a trauma filter of unworthiness or inadequacy. So everything I did, everything I heard, and everything I saw, or even everything that didn't happen that I expected to happen, would be filtered through that filter of unworthiness or inadequacy. So,
Give us a practical example.
well, we could use your example. You were left from that experience with this person that you ribbed, feeling like, oh man, did I do the right thing? So you were filtering that experience through most likely a trauma filter of inadequacy
Hmm.
or perfection, meaning I need to be perfect. I need everything to go exactly as it should. I need everything to be articulate and I need to be respected. And I don't know you that well, but that is an example of how you could get caught up in the middle of the night thinking something again and again and again with no resolution because you're constantly filtering it through this trauma filter of unworthiness or inadequacy in this case, and there's no resolution. The only resolution is, oh, I'm looking at this through a filter of unworthiness, but I am worthy and I am adequate. Maybe I'll just call the guy.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
emotional sobriety is a state of being. It's not a life hack. It's not a tool. It's a completely new state of being without trauma filters and emotionally triggered behaviors like defensiveness or hysteria or jealousy or childishness. Things like not having a voice or things like attacking somebody verbally or physically. So emotional sobriety is really to attain this state of level-headedness and impeccable clarity and peace from the work that is ridding yourself of these things that we just talked about. When you don't have these things in your way, you open your gaze and you can see the world so differently and so much more clear that you never ever believed possible. And then suddenly you're just kind of dropped into this state of poise and courage and integrity. And the only thing that matters to you is what's real.
Let's say, for instance, well, for one thing, I think you really did hit that right on the head. If I have a filter of inadequacy, it is reflected in the fact that I like things to be perfect. And it's not just that I like things to be perfect, it's that I am annoyed when something falls just short of perfect. And I always sort of thought of it as neurosis that was, let's say, part of my charm, and I recognize it in other people, and I go, yeah, I'm the same way. I can dig what you're going through. But I'd like to hear maybe another example of the same kind of thing that where we don't realize that that's what it is. Like, let's say, for instance, jealousy.
Yeah.
What do you hear from people who are recognizing that they exercise some jealousy that may be a result of a trauma filter?
Oh, jealousy is really just fear. So if you look at my work, everything that we do, in my opinion, and based on modern science, is from an emotional addiction. Okay, so if emotions are biochemicals, right? You could think of fear as sometimes adrenaline in the body. You can feel it, right?
Okay.
Sadness is an emotion, is a biochemical. Um, Anger is a biochemical, right? Guilt is a biochemical, embarrassment, etc. So jealousy to me is an emotionally triggered behavior. And it usually is derived from fear of loss, filtering through a filter of betrayal. So somebody who had an early age trauma of betrayal, or filter of distrust, somebody who was tricked or
Mhm.
bamboozled, or lost a loved
Deserted,
one.
maybe. Hmm.
Yes. So I see jealousy a lot in individuals that had early sexual abuse, because that's a betrayal and distrust. I also see it on the exact same way with people whose a parent left the family. It's also really strong when you witness your parents fighting. You tend to entrain or learn the the fears that your parent has. So for example, if your mother came home and she smelled perfume on your dad and she freaked out, and you're a little kid, you feel that and you think, oh gosh, okay, so if dad has this, or if my future husband has this, then I need to freak out, and I'm going to make sure that I am safe and that my children are safe by doing that. And so, to answer your question, jealousy is a very strong emotionally triggered behavior derived from fear. So I have this fear chemical in my body that I've been making since I was a little child. I make it even without having to think a fearful thought anymore, because my body makes it without me even asking. I have the feeling, I match it with a thought, I have an emotionally triggered behavior of jealousy.
Wow.
Or I have a thought because I have a mental obsession of being a detective to try to figure out how I can have the fear again, because I'm an addict of fear.
Mhm.
And then I have an emotionally triggered behavior of jealousy. And then
Addict
I
to
lash
fear.
out.
Yeah. Can we go back to the addictions?
Oh, yeah.
This is a thing that I witness as well, and I don't think that we understand that we're doing it when we're doing it.
No, that's why this work is so impressive, because it gives you the moment of, oh, I didn't even know I did that. Even if people have been saying your whole life, you're jealous, you're just a little jealous, or you're really defensive, or gosh, you're acting like a child. We can't hear that when we're in the middle of an emotionally triggered behavior, because we're belligerent. It would be like telling somebody who's really drunk on alcohol that they're drinking too much. It's not going to work,
Right.
right? So when you have a flood of chemistry, you can become intoxicated under their influence and become emotionally belligerent, the same way you become intoxicated under another chemical like cocaine or alcohol or anything, and become belligerent, where you can no longer rely on yourself or trust yourself to do a conscious, controlled action. You're no longer going to be capable to respond. And in those moments, you are literally someone else. And so you know what, in my past, I've had people say, I'm going to record our next conversation just to prove to you how totally crazy you are. And I never believed it until I really started looking at myself. I'm like, oh my God, I am a little crazy. That's the beauty of this work. And it doesn't have to be a big deal, because all of us are the same. We all have the same sickness with different symptoms. That's it. And if we have that in common, we can easily overcome it with the right training, which is what I teach. And I have, a lot of teachers that I love that I refer to as well. And when we overcome ourselves or get over ourselves, is what I call it, um, we're in such a different position to help others. And not only that, but even if no one around us got better or healthier, emotionally speaking, we're so complete. We're so um, self reliant and poised that we can take our wisdom from who we used to be and we can apply that into this beautiful basket of mercy for everyone else. So the next time somebody comes up to you and is defensive or childish or dishonest, you could think, oh, you know what? I used to be really childish. So that's just their emotionally triggered behavior. Or as we call in our community, I used to have that ETB, that emotionally triggered behavior. And you know what? You can start really using that mercy by saying, oh, it sounds like they have a filter of unworthiness, or they have a filter of lack, or they have a filter of fill in the blank. And it creates this connection that we don't normally get when we're stuck in ourselves and our self-centeredness and thinking about me, you're doing this to me, but what about my feelings? We don't have that anymore. It's needless. We're essentially needless when we become emotionally sober. And it's the most free feeling you'll ever have. And how much more useful you are when you are needless.
To others and to yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can keep growing without limit yourself. And then, the amount of usefulness in me has exponentially grown times a million since I got over myself. Let me tell you.
What is, I don't want to jump ahead, but there's so much in this book and so much for us to unpack that readers just have to read it. And those who go through the coursework are going to have a journey of their own, and that's up to them. And I applaud everybody who takes it on. But what's next?
Well, so this is the thing. This is why I wanted this to be an invitation for a whole movement, because there's so much next. There's this book, yeah, but this is really, this is an introduction. This is an introducing you to the possibility that you could recognize this person that you've always been and just haven't really honed, haven't let them peek through the filters of your past and the habits that you've developed to protect yourself, right? So this is the introduction. I have advanced practices book that I'm, authoring right now, and that's going to be for people who have probably read this book twice, right? This is for the people who would call themselves, okay, I'm emotionally sober. When you complete the workshop, for example, or even when you read this book, if you've done the work honestly and intensely, you will probably be at a level of emotional sobriety that you never thought possible. Now, there's people who can just read the book or take a workshop and not really apply themselves or their heart and soul 100%. They aren't emotionally sober. You can sense it from them. They still struggle with attention-seeking behavior and dishonesty or not knowing their motive behind certain actions. And that's okay, because some people, it might take them 3 years to become sober, right? Whereas some people might go through the first half of the book, have this huge moment of realization, and just be changed forever. It's phenomenal. Whatever it takes to lift that first veil away from your eyes, and you can see who you've really been being. And you just, when you look at that person for the first time, or that component of who you are that isn't working for you, you never have to be them again.
The unfortunate thing is, as I hear you say these things, I realize that there's a you that I've never met that's forward of where I am now, but there's a you that I didn't realize I was being, that I haven't technically met, that I've been being the whole time.
Yeah.
And I'm almost afraid to meet that person.
Well, here's an inside scoop. You're a pretty cool person, so it's not going to be that bad.
Very sweet. I appreciate that. But, when you're talking about identifying these emotionally triggered behaviors, these filters that you place on yourself and the way that you take things in. Those are the things that, that I begin to recognize. I mean, I remember one time when we were training and I was pushing the war wagon somewhere and I was almost there, but I was exhausted. And you could see that I was kind of running out of steam. And I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was something along the lines of, the new you is right over there. Take it to him. Or something like that. That's how I took it. And then I picked my shoulders up and I went the rest of the way. And then I realized, oh, you know what? There was another gear in there.
There's always another gear. And that's the thing. So in any kind of physical transformation, like for me, rehabilitating a spinal injury and becoming a power lifter, there's always a next level of energetic source that you could tap into, right? And again, it's eliminating the illusion that this is your limit, right? There is no limit. As spiritual beings, we are limitless, right? And yeah, I wouldn't go lift up 1,000 pounds right now, but I could train much harder than I ever believed I could. And the same goes with emotional sobriety. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. I mean, I was stubborn and arrogant and dishonest, and not in every area of my life, but in the areas that I was.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
by freeing myself, by going that extra lap with the war wagon, so to speak,
Yeah.
that's where the real change takes place, right? That's where you prove to yourself something different, because all confidence is accomplishment. It's just remembering what you're capable of.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Right? So every little thing that you do in training, it builds your self-esteem, it builds your confidence because you're accomplishing it. No one can tell you that you're whole, or that you should be confident, or that you should love yourself more. That's an inside job, right?
Yes.
You have to do that work.
Absolutely.
And,
100%.
and that's why too, this work's super important for people who are single, or even people who are in relationships, because so often we choose partners in an emotionally unsober state, and we choose them because they give the illusion of filling our deficits, right? So they're in place to either validate or invalidate our trauma-induced self-beliefs. So
Wow.
we're never in a place of real real security within ourselves, so we can never really be detached from our partners. And the only way we can ever be truly free and happy in a relationship is if it's not an attachment based relationship. It's an unconditional love, partnership, friendship based relationship. And so when we choose people to fill our deficits up, that's an exorbitant amount of responsibility to put on another person
Right.
who has their own deficits that they need to fill, right? And that's how the battles start. It's, you're making me feel this way. Well, no, you're making me feel this way. And that can go on and on and on forever, until inevitably we feel massively rejected because it breaks up. And it just doesn't have to be that way anymore. And that's the whole purpose of this. It's stop experiencing pain and chaos in all of your relationships, including the relationships with yourself.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think that there are fears that some people have that, again, are the result of some trauma filter, where somebody's thought is, oh no, my spouse is growing and they're going to outgrow me.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the big things about doing this kind of work, is that, people are probably afraid to some degree that their spouse is going to outgrow them. And then it's so familiar, whatever we're doing, dysfunction, whatever it is, that it's so much easier to revert to that than to try to grow and to try to bring your partner, either try to bring your partner to a place where they feel like it's okay to grow, or maybe they've grown and you're trying to show them that you can see that you're ready to grow. And it's just easier to revert.
That's such an important topic, and I'm actually really impressed that you can sense that, without even doing the work yet. But there is an entire chapter of my book called The Familiar Energy Crisis. And that is that when we make a decision to change, it's already hard enough. We're already battling our ego and our mental programs and our mental patterns or our pathways in our minds that leads us to the normal, the normal, the normal. So when we're butting up against that every single day in training, coming home or going to a circle of friends or anywhere that's familiar, we're going to naturally have an energetic, unspoken unspoken agreement of who we are in that circle. And the way that we talk, especially in a growing up family, there are so many hidden, veiled ways of speaking and established roles that we're expected to do and behave like and feel a certain way and contribute to or bring drama to the relationship. And so the familiar energy crisis is when you've decided to change, you engage in the training, you return to a familiar energy, and you get pulled backward. And it's such a strong unconscious phenomena. It really is. And when the first time it happens, you're going to be like, whoa. And you might not even notice it. That's the scary thing.
Yeah.
You might go days and not notice it. And then just all of a sudden you get over yourself and you look down at yourself from above and you think, "Oh my gosh, you're doing that again." And I like to use an example of if you just started a diet and you've lost 30 pounds and you feel so good and you've accomplished something that you didn't think you could, and then you go to your family's house for your mom's birthday, and this is a real story, by the way. And you go to your mom's house for her birthday, and dad's making steak and potatoes and your brothers and sisters are drinking beer and wine and there's chips and salsa and snacks everywhere, and you go in prepared. I'm not going to eat more than this much on my plate, and I know how much I can have, and I'm totally happy with this decision, and these pants fit me and I feel amazing. And you go there with the intention and the willpower to not fall into that familiar pull of the food. And within 20 minutes, someone hands you a beer and you say, "No, thanks, I'm not drinking." And they say, "Why?" And you'd say, "Well, because I'm on a diet." And they say, "But it's mom's birthday. You can't be on a diet on mom's birthday."
Yeah.
And instantly they feel the chemistry that they always feel in that familiar energy. Maybe they get small around a sibling, right? They shrink in their power. Maybe they start bickering with their dad about politics or religion or whatever it is. And within 25 minutes, they're indulging in the same food habits as that family. Now imagine if you go into that with such ferocity. "I'm not going to do this. I made a promise to myself," over food. Guaranteed within 25 minutes, you're going to be sucked into the same emotional habits, the same speaking habits, the same thinking patterns that the family has always had together.
Mm-hmm.
That's a familiar energy crisis. And that's why so many people have to really go and become emotionally sober in solitude, so to speak, or in a community of people who are really, really serious about it. And then learn the tools once you reach a level of sobriety where you trust yourself enough to return. That's the most important thing, because most of us, if we're emotionally unsober, we're not safe to be around either, because we're yelling at people. And
in that example, though, the sibling who said, "Come on, have a beer,"
yeah,
they're leaning into their own familiarity.
yeah, they're not consciously trying to throw you off.
Yeah.
They just want it to feel normal for them.
Right.
But this is fun. I want to have fun with you. This is how we have fun. I'm not sure how to have fun with you.
Ourselves to recognize fun.
Yeah, I don't know how to show you I love you unless it's this way.
Wow. That is enormous. Community is everything. I mean, as we pointed out, I haven't done this work, but the work that we've done together in just physical transformation is very similar, and all of these patterns exist, and community is important there as well. So I can see exactly why. Is Is the physical or the emotional harder? What's more difficult?
I would say that the emotional was harder because in my physical transformation, I didn't have as much ego in the way.
Okay.
So my ego, for example, let's say I was doing a assignment in emotional sobriety training, and I was looking at areas of my life where I had done wrong. I may have written something down in the beginning of my training with the theme of somebody else reading it. So, what would Jeremy say if he read this about what I'm writing about Jeremy, as opposed to what really happened?
Hmm.
So in physical training, you don't really get that. You don't get that opportunity. It's you against the iron. You know, you're you're either going to make the lift or you're not. You're going to bring all your intensity or you're not, or you're just not strong enough, and that's okay. But with
Right.
emotional sobriety training, you have to get real. Getting real is hard when you're used to not being real, or when you feel that it keeps you safe to not be real. Or worst, if you don't even know what real is, which
Hmm.
was my experience.
Wow.
Now, yeah, an inside story for me was I was a doctor and a mom, and I thought that I had this, I thought I had this all together, but I really had dysfunctional relationships, and romantic relationships are where I was absolutely abysmal. Um, so one of my friends said, you know, you're not really you're not being who you say you want to be. You're, like in a very soft way, you're kind of not really you that you say you are. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And they said, just be real.
Quit being a faker.
Right. And I'm like, what is that even? Of course I'm real. And
Yeah.
I remember, of course, getting very defensive because
Of course.
that was one of my emotionally triggered behaviors.
Yeah.
And kind of going home and thinking, what did they mean by real? And then realizing I didn't even know what real meant, which meant I probably wasn't real.
Wow.
That was my first big sobering up moment. I wasn't sober yet, but I recognized, wow, I have a lot of work to do, and this is really scary. So, touching on your point of not being ready, I wasn't ready either, but I had motivation to become ready by looking at my kid and looking at the state of my relationships and deciding I have to do something different.
You could recognize that at that point.
Yeah, I have to do something different. And the worst thing that can happen is I just get a little better,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's the worst thing.
That's the worst thing that can happen from this,
Yeah.
right? And
Wow.
yes, I mean, looking at some of this is hard, but it's not as hard as keeping it inside. I always say that our secrets, we bury our secrets until they bury us,
Ooh.
right? That's 100% true. And the secret doesn't have to be some huge thing like you cheated on your husband or, you did something terrible. A secret could be a very subtle lie that you tell again and again to the point where you believe it's true.
Hmm.
Or it could be something happening to you that you're now protecting somebody else because you're embarrassed of it being exposed. These things that we then have to adapt and shipshape, who we become in order to make space for our lies and our secrets. That's what makes us sick. And so opening up that vault can seem scary, but it's not as scary as keeping it.
Wow. As you say all of these things, I'm forced to, and I think our listeners would probably say the same thing. I'm forced to wonder what of that I embody. So when you say, oh, there are little secrets, we probably don't even identify them. They're just behaviors that we perpetuate. I go through the inventory of what is it that I'm doing. And I haven't identified anything yet that feels like it's burying me, but attacking these things, like you said, you can only get the worst that can happen is you can get a little better. Um, we're rounding third base here, but I want to touch on something that you said earlier, which was growing up family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you used the term growing up family.
Yeah, I coined that to describe the people that we grew up with. So our mothers, our fathers, our siblings, the people that were our closest circle growing up.
Okay.
The growing up family has the most dense secrets and established roles and their own language of their tribe. So much so that it's really like if I came to your house and sat with your family for a month, it would feel like a maze to me. But to you, it's easy peasy
It's what it's
because
always been.
it's what it's always been. It's how you learn to speak.
Yeah.
Same way if I moved to Russia, I'd be like, what? And I have no idea what's going on here. I can't speak this language. You could pick up on some cues and some body language, but most of the time in our tribe, our language is spoken through energy
Mm-hmm.
or or
Expectation.
expectation and obligation. And what's amazing is I've done a lot of family coaching in the same environment. And what's amazing is when people are asked to speak out loud the unspoken agreements, the mom and the daughter will have two different interpretations of what the agreement even was.
Yes.
And
Oh,
it's just so funny because it's like, you what? You thought that?
yeah.
I always thought
All
this.
the time.
And
And
it's a
sincerely thought it.
waste. It's such a waste. So if we could all just get real, if we just have a party and just
Yeah.
relax.
Yeah.
It's just
That brought me to, I mean, you really brought me right to certain moments when those things were exposed because somebody spoke up. And they
oh
didn't
yeah.
have to be big things. It's just a little thing. Here's how everybody does this. And then somebody goes, what? Why? I don't do that. I'm not like that. And everybody goes, yeah, you kind of are. And
Yeah.
we all notice and we all react the same way. And then after that, it becomes, I guess it, and I'm waiting for you to chime in and correct me when I'm wrong, but I, I guess what happens when you expose those things is you slowly go from, yeah, you are, to, oh, yeah, I guess I kind of am, to, ooh, I did that again.
Yeah.
But it only comes with exposure because the things that I'm thinking in my mind, I can remember a particular incident around I think it was a Thanksgiving table. Maybe it was whatever it was a family holiday. And we said something, and somebody said, and I said something to my mom. And my mom was like, what? And everybody was like, ooh, they all looked at me like, how dare you say that? But it was like, it's how we operate. And then after that, my mom started to recognize, like, okay, all right, well, I can do that differently. And it wasn't even that big a thing. It was just that it was unspoken
Yeah.
and differently interpreted between everybody.
Right. Because
So,
everybody has their own trauma filter.
yeah. So, how does growing up family differ from current family?
Well, it's not so different to the point where like it requires a separate segment.
Yeah.
But so your children and your wife are very different than your growing up family in a lot of ways. However, some of the ways you expect to be loved might be the same. Some
Uh-huh.
of the ways that you may want to communicate and they don't might be the same.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's super important to know. I always say you can't edit what you don't see.
Right.
So if we aren't looking so deliberately and diligently at our own selves, not at the people around us, at our own selves, taking responsibility, and I'd like to really clarify, it doesn't mean we're taking blame. We're taking responsibility for ourselves and every problem in our lives. Then we have the power to change everything. Now, if I'm sitting here and arguing with you about how you need to treat me and how you need to talk to me in a specific way because I have these needs and I have these filters and you need to accommodate that,
Uh-huh.
you're not going to necessarily have the tools to do it because you have your own.
Right. And you're not fixing your I don't want to use the word fixing.
I get it. Yeah, I don't like that either.
Yeah.
It's just it's taking responsibility and deciding to change it.
Right. Well,
Because if I can stop being a crazy jealous person, then you can do anything.
yeah.
Say that to the world. I
Well, I
promise.
want to say one more word. Everybody, go get the book. It's called "You You've Never Met: How to Stop Experiencing Pain and Chaos in All of Your Relationships by Sobering Up, Emotionally Speaking." And there is a lot of emotional speaking, and I am glad that there is further work to be done, because this book is so thick and it is so dense and so intense in what it gives you for tools to improve yourself, not fix, improve.
Improve.
I'm glad that there's more after this, because my immediate reaction was, holy cow, you've dumped everything you've learned right into this book. How could there possibly be anything left? But
Well,
as
the
you
prop,
continue to,
yeah. The thing is it just doesn't stop. Once you open up the channel to be, an educator, it's like, oh, there's something else.
there's something else. There's something else, all right. Our guest today has been Dr. Andrea Vitz, somebody I'm very, very, very fortunate to call my friend, and I think everybody should get the book. So there's a link there in the comments. You should go get it. You can get it in Amazon. It'll be at your house in a few days. And get to work, everybody. You don't have to be ready. You're already ready.
No.
Yeah.
And there's a great community just waiting to embrace you.
Yeah, there really is. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, John. It's always so fun having talk with you.
I'll see you soon.
Yeah, you will.